Hello and welcome to another tutorial by LevelUp Networks. Following our previous one where I showed you how to set up and install Active Directory, today we're going to go over a few things we can do in Active Directory, like for example, how to create new users, how to set up security groups, and how to more or less organize Active Directory to meet our desired expectations. So let's get started. So I've already started the server, and now I'm just going to go into Active Directory. So we go to Start, Windows Administrative Tools, and we go to Active Directory, Users and Computers. So let's open that now. So because Active Directory is one of maybe the most used programs, for lack of a better word, or systems within your server, I'm going to leave this on my taskbar and I'm going to pin it. So this works just like Windows 10, where you right click on it and you pin to the taskbar. Okay, so as you can see here, we have the default view. We have here our forest, and within our forest we have the different containers for which we can configure our Active Directory. So let's expand this. Now, the ones we're going to check today, as you recall on the previous tutorial, we joined the domain and we also added our Windows 10 virtual computer to the domain as well. So in order to check if it's there, we'll click on computers, and here it is. This is our Windows 10. Then if you go to domain controllers, you'll see here that our server is there. And then you're going to see all the users. Now, all of these are obviously the built-in users and security groups that come by default when you install Active Directory. Now, we can add users here, but I like to have Active Directory a bit more organized. So we're going to create a new organizational unit for this. So if we just click on the parent folder here, which is our forest of levelupdemo.local, we right click, we go to new, and we're going to do a new organizational unit. So we click here. Now, here all we have to do is put the name of it, and by default it will protect it, so you can't delete it. I highly recommend that you leave this on, as this will prevent any accidental deletions of your organizational unit. So let's call our OU as the company name. You can call it whatever you want. So I will call it LevelUp Networks Staff, or just LevelUp Networks, and I'll show you why. We press OK. So there we have it. We have a blank organizational unit. Now from here you can also put other children organizational units, which we are. So I'm going to set up 3 of them. So the first one, we just go to new organizational units, and we'll call this staff. And then we'll put another one called security groups. And then we'll put another one called distribution groups. Now we're going to work on all of them with the exception of distribution groups, just because I'm not going to connect my server with any Exchange server or with any email. But this is where you would create those distribution groups to send to members of them mass emails, for example. So you could create, for example, an organizational group called all staff, where you put everyone. So when you send to all staff at your domain name, it will send to everyone there. So let's start by creating staff members. Now, I will create yet one more organizational group underneath staff, and I will put that for admins. So these are going to be users that have administrator privileges for both the servers and obviously for the PCs. Okay, so let's create a couple staff members. So we go under staff, we go on the right hand side, so on this white area here, we right click, we go to new, and in this case we want to put a new user. So this works exactly the same as in previous versions of Windows Server. So it's pretty straightforward. So let's start with the name. So let's just be, I don't know, let's call this guy Tom. And let's put Smith as his last name. Now for the user login, this is where, if this is the first time you have set up your Active Directory, it's very good at this stage to start thinking of how you want your usernames to look like. So you can put them by their first name, first initial, last name, first initial dot last name, however you like. But to keep the consistency throughout your staff members, especially think of growth. So if you start up with just a couple users, who knows, maybe in a few years you might have 100 users. So maybe if you have initial dot last name, there's a lot of people that will have T. Smith in your organization. So maybe you want to make it first name dot last name, or however, as I said earlier. But in this case, we're just going to create just 3-4 users. That's it. So we're going to keep it very simple. So we're going to put first initial, last name. Okay. So as you can see, it auto-populated already this one. So this one is just for pre-Windows 2000. Now, if you're using a server or a machine that's before build 2000, you need to upgrade that. But if you can't because you're running a very legacy piece of hardware that only works on Windows 95, for example, Windows XP, then fine. Let's leave it as is. So I will put next. So here you can put the password for the user. Generally, we would put a generic password and then allow the user to change it when they first log into the system. Now, bear in mind that this normally works on your local network, but there may be times where on a remote desktop system, or cloud server, that this particular function of allowing people to change their password upon login may not always work. But in this case, we are going to use our VirtualBox environment, which is essentially a local network. So I will leave it as that. So let's put in a password. We put it twice. So you have here 4 options. So you can say the first one, which is automatically selected, user must change password at next logon. We will leave that on. You can also set it up so the person cannot change the password. Now, when would you do this? You would potentially want to do this if you have a generic user account, like say, for example, for a scanner, a photocopier, or some system that needs some sort of login to potentially send an email, and you don't want people to be able to change the password. That's where you would put it. Password never expires. Once again, this depends on your security policy, or although it is best practice to have passwords expire every certain amount of days or months. But if you're talking once again of generic accounts, you don't want the photocopier machine to reset itself every 3 months, or otherwise every 3 months you will need to go into the printer and the photocopier and change it manually, and it becomes a bit of unnecessary administration. And then the account is disabled. Now this is something you probably would never use when you're setting up a user. But this is something you would select when a user, for example, leaves the organization, but you wish to still keep the login details, or because they have a mailbox attached to them. So the only one we're going to set up right now is the first one, which they must change it. So let's go next. Okay, this just confirms everything you've done. If everything looks how it's meant to be, then just click on finish. and now it has created our user Tom Smith. So let's explore a little bit the basic features of Tom Smith. So when we open it, it takes you to general, and we can see here the first name, the last name, and the display name. Here in the description, as you can see, not only in the box, but also on the main screen of Active Directory, you can put a description. So this is usually handy to put the title of the person, so you know which department they're in, or you know more or less what they do. So let's make Tom Smith a marketing executive. Okay. If you have different sites, for example, you have the London office, you have the New York office, then potentially this is where you want to put it. So let's put Tom in London. This is all optional. You don't have to do it, obviously. And then the telephone number, you know, once again, so people know how to call them. And you can fill out the email address, web page, all that. Okay, but I'll leave that blank. Here an address, once again, if you want to put the address of the particular person. So all these details that you're putting here, also in general, would appear, for example, on Outlook when you set up your email server, and you could see exactly all these details. And then, you know, in future, should you then have some sort of signature manager, you could then import all these details into that person's signature, but we won't do it here. Then under account, once again, the basics, you know, the username. You can potentially also tell this person can log in during working hours or only on Saturdays. So let's say, for example, you have pretty strict security. So you would say here from, okay, what time to what time. So let's say if your office is Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, you would only allow Tom Smith to connect to the network between 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. But once again, this is not something you would normally do. It's just only if you have very strict guidelines. And then if, let's say, for example, Tom puts his password in a few times wrong, so his account is locked, then you would get here a message saying that his account is locked, and you can unlock it from here. And here you have a few other settings. We won't go through all of them, but you know, like I said, you have the default ones we have when we set them up, or you have even a bit more. You can set up the account to expire. So let's say, for example, this person is only going to work for a couple of months. So you want the password to expire, or the account to expire on a certain day after he leaves or she leaves. And then we have here a profile, which we won't get into right now, telephones, organization, you know, you have quite a few things. So that's Tom. Let's press OK. We've set him up. So as you can see now, we have now his description as marketing executive. So let's create now another user. You can literally go like we did before, which is right click, then new, and user. But let's say this person will be exactly the same as Tom. So meaning the same sort of settings, not necessarily the same position in terms of where he's working, but you know, the same security settings. So we just right click and we just copy it. Okay, so we are presented now with the same screen as before. So let's call him Jack. And he'll be Jack Jones. So like I said here, we have to keep the same sort of username naming convention as we did with the Tom. So it would be first initial, last name, and next. And once again, we will put a password. We will leave it for him to log in as to change his password when he likes logins, and next, and finish. Now, let's see what that accomplished. So if we open Tom Smith and Jack Jones, so this is Tom Smith and Jack Jones, okay? So obviously, because these details are personal for each user, these do not get copied across. But what does get copied across. If you go to member, a member, they'll be part of domain users. Now, obviously, when you create a new user, by default, it will put domain users as a new one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a security group, and we're going to give access to the security group called marketing to Tom, and then we're going to create another marketing executive, and you'll see how that security group propagates over. So let's cancel both of these. Go back into Active Directory. Right, so if we go to security groups here, and we go to right click, new, and we will put a group. And let's put here, I don't know, access to marketing drive. So basically, this security group, it's going to be able, once we create, for example, a file share to a marketing, they will have access to that folder, and everyone who's part of this group will only be able to access that folder. Let me rephrase that. So the people, in order to gain access to marketing drive, you will need to be part of this marketing. So here we have the options of the group scope and the group type. Now by default, global is okay, but if you manage to, or if you plan to create a hybrid Active Directory that connects with, for example, Office 365, and you want this particular drive to synchronize as well with your 365, you will need to make this universal, otherwise it won't work. But for this purpose, global is absolutely fine. And then you have the option of security group or distribution group. So in this case, it is a security group. So we'll leave the defaults and we press OK. So now we're going to add users to this group. Very simple. You can just double click on it, and then you can see that you have now, members of, and managed by. So the only one we really care about right now is members. So let's add Tom. So we pressed add, and you can either, if you know his username, we just put T Smith, for example, and press Control K. Check names, and that has found it. Okay. Another way to do this, if you don't recall the username, is you go to Advanced. Okay. You can put starts with Tom, for example. Find now. That has found it as well. Or let's say you want to see everyone because you have to add multiple. So just go find nows, and then you scroll down. You find Tom Smith, and you double click on him, and there you go. Press OK. So we know Tom Smith now is part of it. So we press OK. So if we now go back to the staff, we go back to Tom Smith, we go to member of, there you go. Now this person is part of the marketing, access to marketing drive security group. So as I said earlier, let's create another user, our final user, and we will copy him. Okay, so now let's make now Sarah, I don't know, Sarah Black. So username will be sblack. Next, put the password twice, and press next and finish. So now technically, Sarah should also have access to the marketing drive. So let's double click on her, member of, and there she does. So as you can see, by copying Tom, it has propagated the same permissions as Tom has. So that doesn't mean if we, for example, Jack, which we also copied earlier, this doesn't mean when we copied that now it will have it. So it's still part of domain users. So if you change Tom after you copied him for another user, those permissions will not propagate. You will then need to add the permissions for Jack if you want to, for example. Okay, so those are our 3 users. Now I'm going to create an admin user. So under admins, we go to new user. Okay, And because we're on the server, let's call this LevelUp Networks. LevelUp admin. Now for the admin, I don't recommend you do the same convention as your users, because if someone figures out that your name is LevelUp admin, they could just put L admin, and that means that they would at least have half of the required details to log into your server, which is a username, and then they could just brute force your password. So for admins, I would not follow any convention or create a new one. So in this case, I will just, I'll put a LevelUp admin, which is not too secure anyways, because it's just the name and the last name, but you get the idea. Next. So I will not put the user to change, and I'll leave everything as default, and here I will put a different password that I did previously. And that's it. So there's two ways to do this. So let's say, for example, you have a few admins, and you want to give them access to all the drives. So what I like to do is to create a security group, such as this one, as we did before. We go new group, and here we say, for example, access to all drives. Same. Okay. And I'll show you why you would do this. And then we just add LevelUp. And okay. So obviously we're going to have maybe an access to marketing drive, access to finance, access to HR, access to, I don't know, media. So instead of giving all those groups to the administrator, you just make one. So when you create the drive, or the shared, you would give access as administrator to this, and we know that the administrator can go there. Okay. So let's go back to staff, admins. So LevelUp admin. Let me show you another way to do it. So if you go to right click, you can go add to group. Okay. So it starts with access. So we go access, check names. So now we have 3 of them. So this is the built-in one. So we just give them access to all drives. Okay. Okay. We've added LevelUp admin to that group. Okay. So now if we go to member of, there we go. So this one, obviously, it's just a domain user at the moment, which means that LevelUp admin has absolutely no admin rights at all. So we're going to add them to a few other ones. So instead of doing it from here, we're going to add the actual security group. We're going to do it from here, member, add. So anything that has admin in it, check name, to administrators. So probably the best way is just to go advanced, find now. So it's part of administrators already. So we also want LevelUp admin to be domain admin, DNS admin, enterprise admin. So essentially everything that has admin. Fantastic. And I will also allow to become remote desktop user. And now the reason for this is so if he's part of this, then we can literally remote desktop also into the server should we need to through just basic RDP. It's handy to have it. So basically we're part of everything. Apply and okay. Okay, so that's how you create 3 users. That's how you create the administrator. And that's how you create security groups. Distribution groups works exactly the same as security group. The only difference is that a distribution group is an actual email. Okay, so that's really it for now in terms of how to set up users. In the next tutorial, we're going to create a few policies for admins and for local users, and we're going to test it on our Windows 10 deployment, so you can see how every different user has different rights. So for example, we're going to block certain things from the control panel, so a normal user cannot change, for example, the background or the display, but an admin can do everything. So until then, take care. Thank you very much. To get the latest tutorials, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Until then, take care.